Good morning, grade 11s. It is good to see you again. I have to say it is good to see you here because nobody comes to my hangouts. But that's okay, it just reminds me of lunchtime. So, let us get down to work. Alright, so here we are on this page. Remember, I told you I was not going to do 4, 5, and 6 of the last two. And then I was going to show you the key to everything on page 83, which I already have done on another page. So let's do 4, 5, and 6 first here. So number 4. 4 is yucky. X squared. Oh, that's small. Let's fix that up a little for us. There we go. 4x squared plus 7x minus 4 equals 0. So I check that. Doesn't factor because there's no factors of 4 that add to 7. So I'm going to complete the square. Sorry, it's early. So x squared plus 7x. Then I'm going to move that 4 over here so it's out of the way. Equals positive 4. Now, this one is an odd number, so this is really yucky to do completing the square with. But don't worry, because today you're going to learn something that will allow you to do this without completing the square. So we divide that by 2, and we square the result, and we get plus 49 fourths. Now that is 12 and 1/4, right? So that is 12 and 1/4. So that's what I have added to both sides. So that now gives me x plus 7 over 2 squared equals 16 and 1/4, right? So that is x plus 7 over 2 equals, I of course remember to square root both sides, equals, where's my green ink, plus or minus the root of 16 fourths. 1/4 x equals negative 7 halves plus or minus the root of 16 and 1/4. Now remember that is also negative 7 over 2 plus or minus the root of, if you don't like writing it like that, that's 65 fourths. Alrighty. Oh, my coffee is ready. Excuse me a moment. Okay, we're back. Number 5. X squared minus 2x minus 6 equals 0. No factors of 6 that add to 2, so I complete the square. X squared minus 2x equals 6. And this one is easy because 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 1 squared is 1, so I've just added 1 to both sides. So now I've got x plus 1 squared, x minus 1 squared equals 7. X minus 1 equals plus or minus the root of 7. X equals 1 plus or minus the root of 7. And lastly, number 6. X squared. Now, I'm going to eliminate a step here. There's no factors of 3 that add to 1, so I'm just going to go ahead and write this that way. Half Remember, that's a 1 there. So and then squared. So I'm adding 1/4 to both sides, which gets me x plus 1/4 squared equals, that is 12/4, so that equals 13/4 x plus 1/4 equals 13, plus or minus the root of 13/4 x equals negative 1/4 plus or minus 13, the root of 13/4. Now, again, we could do more with that, so I'm just going to pause for a second, let you have a think about that. Oh, and of course, sorry, that's 1/2 squared, 1/2, and 1/2. Now, remember, I said you could have a think about this. Remember, this right here is really, I'll use a different color, the root of 13/2. Now they have the common denominator, so it's -1 plus or minus root 13 all over 2. That's the best answer. And that's what I'd like you to be getting to. So that was that, 4, 5, and 6. Let's come on to this 4, 5, and 6. Remember, these ones are a little bit different because, of course, they have a number out front. So let's check with check with 4. Now I see that I've got a 4 there, so I'd like to get rid of it. Oh, but I can't. Okay. So then you might say, all right, well, then could I divide this by 2? But that one doesn't divide by 2. So it's a bit of a pain all the way around. So what could we do with that? Well, you could do this. Move that 5 over like we've always done. Now, what could we do? Well, again, we could divide this by 2. And now I have 2x squared plus 3x equals 5. But we're still screwed, aren't we? Why? Because we've got a 2 there and we can't get rid of it there unless we make that a fraction. So I'm going to take a second, I'm going to stop again, let you have a think. Look, we're back. So look, if we're going to have a fraction there, we might as well have it up here, right? So let's do this. I'm going to divide this side by 4 to get rid of that 4. Now that gives me x squared plus, now 6 over 4 is really 3 over 2x, right? That still equals 5 because I'm only factoring this side. That's cool. So now I've got to complete the square situation here, yes? So I'll pause a moment, check. All right, now I've factored here. And I said I didn't have to factor here because I'm only factoring this side. But, of course, I do. So now, what's half of 3 halves? Well, I'm going to slide over here real quick. 3 halves divided by 2 is the same as 3 halves times a half, right? So that is 3/4. So this divided, I'll change color because I was using red, divided by 2 and squared is 3/4. Now over here I've got 5/4. So I've added 3/4. Now, pretty easy. X. Oh, sorry, it's not 3/4. It's, yeah, 3/4. But I forgot to square it. So that is, plus 9/16. So now I've got x plus 3/2 squared equals, now this is, of course, 20/16. So that equals 29/16. Square root both sides. X plus 3/2 equals plus or minus the square root 29/16. So x equals -3/2 plus or minus the root of 29/16. Now there is an answer. It's not the best answer, of course. We'd like to simplify it. So what's the square root of 16? We know that is 4. -3/2 plus or minus the root of 29/4. Then we have a common denominator situation. That will get me to -6 plus or minus root 29/4. 29/4. And then if you want to get really technical, you could do it as, because 6 and 4 both have a common factor, you could do, no, you would just leave it like that, because this has a 1, right? You could make it really ugly if you wanted to go one step further. And it would be, well, then we just end up right back here. So that's all good. Number 5. Now, let's check number 5, because we complete the square usually when we see a number there, right? But we should remember something. Have a look at number 5. Look at your work, because I bet most of you probably just completed the square anyway. Look at it and see if there's another thing you could think to try. So I hope some of you looked and saw, hey, wait a minute, 2 times -6 is -12. -12 has factors that add to 1, so I could have factored this. So let's factor it, and then I want to show you something. So here we go. So I needed 2x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. So I need to multiply to -12 and add to -1. So it's x plus 3/2 and x minus 4/2, which is x plus 3/2 and x minus 2 equals 0, which means x equals -3/2 and +2. If I factor now, I want to show you something. We know this is the answer. So I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to move it right here, because we know that's the answer. Now, let's say you forget to check to factor. All right, Myers wants me to complete the square, so I guess I'm completing the square. All right, so I can't get rid of the 2 nicely, so we're just going to divide everything by 2. That's going to get me x squared minus 1/2 x equals 3. Because -6 divided by 2 is -3, and then I move it over and it's 3. Half of that is 1/4. 1/4 squared is 1/16. So I'm going to add 1/16 to this side. Cool, cool. So now I have x minus 1/4 squared equals, now I'm going to do this as 49/16. 16 times 3 is 48 and 1 is 49. Square root both sides, x minus 1/4 equals plus or minus the root of 49 over 16 is 7/4. Oops, 7/4, right? Because I got to take a square root of that side. I got to take a square root of that side. It's perfect squares. So now x equals positive 1/4 plus or minus 7/4. Well, 1/4 and 7/4, 1 plus 7 is 8/4, and 1 minus 7 is 6, negative 6/4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. Negative 6/4 is negative 3/2. And you see we get the same answer. But I would argue factoring is a little simpler and quicker. So it's up to you. If you see the difference, you can do that. And lastly, let's look at number 6. Oh, I don't like using red. So you guys have a look at number 6. Look at your work. Oh, crap. Look at your work. See if you're going to be happy with it. All right. So I'm going to divide everything by 10. X squared plus now 4 over 10 is 2/5. X equals 1/2, because 5 divided by 10 is 1/2, and then when I move it over, I get positive. So that is half of 2/5 is 2/10. Squared is 4/100, which is 120. Oh, it's not 4/100. Sorry, it's divide that by 2 and square it, which is 2/10 squared, which is 4/100, which is 1/25. So now I have x plus, oh, I don't like using red there, x plus 1/25 squared equals, I got to add 1/25 to this side. Now, the common denominator is 50, so that's 27/50. Square root both sides, x plus 1/25 equals plus or minus the square root of 27/50. X equals negative 1/25 plus or minus the square root of 27/50. Now, of course, we'd like to tidy that up. If we leave it that way, that's an answer and we're happy. So if you have that answer, great. But by now, take a second to see if you can tidy it up. All right, so how could we tidy this? Well, that negative 1/25 plus or minus 27 is 9 times 3. So that's 3√3 over 50 is 25 times 2. So that's 5√2. Right? So we could have done that. And hopefully everyone's cool. Now, I'm going to find the other page. So here it is. This is page 83. This first one, of course, factors. So there's your right answer. This one doesn't factor. So I run it through to complete the square. Then I get to here. Square root of a negative number. Is that possible? No. So there's no solution there. Now I know some of you will be frustrated by that, like, oh man, ugh. But you already know that you can't take a square root of a negative number. Here's number 3. We wanted to get rid of the negative, of course, so we divide everything by negative 2. So I divided everything by -2. Then I added -2 to both sides, and I got to there. And then this one, I don't like that 1/2, so I multiplied everything by 2. Multiply everything by 2, complete the square. Again, I end up with a square root of a negative, so there's no solution. And number 5 and number 6. There's the answer. I divided everything by -5 to tidy it up. And over here, I moved this side. I moved it over to this side, and I moved the 0 over there. So I was dealing with a positive x. And then I just did the same thing that I always do. Now you'll notice down here, the blue answer, I simplified it one more time because the square root of 4 is 2. So I put everything over 2. And then I had a common denominator, so I could just add them. And that's where we are today from old stuff. So let's look at the new stuff now. I had to remind you of a couple of things. ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That is a quadratic equation. Now we remember the ways to solve this, to find out what x equals. That's our goal. To do that, you have 2 ways so far. One, you can factor, if possible. 2, you can complete the square. But if b is odd or a doesn't equal 1, then completing the square is a pain. But watch. I'm going to start with a regular old quadratic. There we go, right there. Now look. Let's pretend this doesn't factor. So we're going to complete the square. So I'm going to have ax squared plus bx equals -c. Right? Because I'm going to move that over. Yeah? Now, I don't like that a there. So I'm going to divide everything by a. Now I've got x squared plus bax equals -ca. Now, next thing, I got to cut that in half and square it. So that becomes b over 2a squared. So that becomes b squared over 4a. And now I've added b squared over 4a. So now, on this side, I have x squared plus b over a, sorry, not x squared, x plus b over 2a, right, because that's 2a squared equals, now this side right here, what can I do there? Well, that is -4c over 4a plus b squared, right? Everybody's following me to there? Oh, excuse me a moment. Sorry. Where was I? 4a squared there. Right? So now I've got equals squared equals. Now, I don't like a negative there first, so I'm going to do b squared minus 4 AC, because I had to multiply this side by 4a, right? All of that over 4, oh shoot, I'm using black. All of that over 4a squared. Now, next step is square root. So I square root both sides. And I get x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. X equals negative b over 2a, because I bring that over, plus or minus. Now, 4a squared has a square root, so that's going to be over 2a, but this top doesn't, b squared minus 4ac. Now I have a common denominator, so now I have negative b plus or minus the root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now you're smart kids. A, B, 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 C, C. If I complete the square there, I get that. And if that is completing the square, that will give me my x goal. This formula will work for any equation. You can always use that formula, and I will always give you that formula. I mean, eventually you'll have it memorized once you've practiced, but for now you get it. Now, remember, you can factor still. You can complete the square. But the quadratic formula always works. Now, the problem with it is it's a little messy, and sometimes kids screw it up because there's a negative b at the beginning and blah, blah, blah. So if you can factor, you should. If the complete the square is easy, there's no number out front, and it's an even b, go ahead and complete the square. But sometimes you're stuck with this. So let's use it. It's pretty easy to use. What's this? There's my a. I'm going to use a weird color. There's my a. That's blue. It's hard to see. There's my a. There's my b. There's my c. So now all I do is I fill in this formula. Negative b. Well, b is 4. So I have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of b squared 16 minus 4 times a is 1 times c is negative 6 over 2 times 1, because that's a. So I'm going to do that again with the highlighting. A, oops, that's not A. A, B squared, B. I should have written, sorry there, guys. I should have written 4 squared, because that is B, and then C. And then I just do the answer. Negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared is 16. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 6 is positive 24 over 2. Negative 4 plus or minus the root of 40 over 2. And there is an answer. But of course we should simplify it. 40 is 4 times 10. So that's going to get me negative 4 plus or minus 2 root 10 over 2. 2. Negative 2 plus or minus, the 2's cancel, root 10. And that is your best possible answer. Now, in math class, that is your answer. But in the real world, that makes no sense. So we remember, in the real world, like if we were doing a physics question or something, this would be -2 plus the square root of 10, or -2 minus the square root of 10. And you would get these from your calculator if we were in the real world or doing a physics question. This is the exact answer. And that's usually what we want in math class. This is the approximate answer. And that's usually what we want in real life, because this doesn't make sense to a lot of people. But if I were to say the square root of 10 is around 3, if I were to say -2 plus 3, it's about -1, right? Then people can follow along. So let's do B. Now, right there, is that in ax squared? Is that? No. So you just move it around. This is 2x squared minus 3x minus 7 equals 0. And now, lucky us, I have an A, a B, and a C. And I can just go to work. X equals -b, 3, plus or minus the root of b squared, 9, minus 4 times 2 times -7. All that over 2 times a, which is 4. 3 plus or minus the root of -4 times 2 is -8. -8 times -7 is +56. +56 and 9 is 65 over 4. And then I would simplify if I could. Can I simplify 65? No. So this is done. And let's do our last one. C. Does it look like this? No, so I just make it look like that. 3x squared minus 7x minus 6 equals 0. And then, again, you see I have an A, a B, and a C. And I just fill it in. X equals -b. So -7 plus or minus the root of -7 squared minus 4 times 3 times -6 over, I'm going to write this out properly, -7 over 2 times 3. And then I just fix it. -7 is 7 plus or minus the root of 7 squared is 49. -4 times 3 is -12. -12 times -6 is +72 over 6. 49 plus 72 is 7 plus or minus is plus or minus 121 all over 6. 121 has a square root. It's 11. So 7 plus 11 or minus 11 over 6. 7 plus 11 is 7 plus 11 over 6 is 18 over 6, which equals 3. There's one answer. And then I'll change shades of blue slightly. 7 minus 11 over 6 is -4 over 6, which is -2/3. And that's your other answer. And that's how you use the quadratic formula. And we remember it always works. So we'll do page 85. And then I'm going to ask you to do page 86 and 87. So the sum of two squares of two consecutive integers is 613. So I have two numbers, right? Number 1 equals x, because I don't know what it is. Number 2 is x plus 1, because they're consecutive, so it's the very next number. Now, the sum, that's plus, of the squares is 613. So I got to square both. X squared plus x plus 1 squared equals 613. And now I just do the math. X squared plus that, all of you are going to forget, you're going to do it like you always do, that is x plus 1 times x plus 1, which is x squared plus 2x. I'm going to make this bigger. X squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 613. Collect your like terms. 2x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 613. That does not look like our nice quadratic formula, so I'm going to bring that 613 over, and I'm going to get 2x squared plus 2x minus 612 equals 0. 212 divide x squared plus 2x minus, x squared plus x minus 306 equals 0. Now, do I have an A, B, and C? Of course I do. I'm going to pause, let you start on it. All right, we're back. A, B, C. So, x equals negative 1, negative b, plus or minus the root of b squared, 1 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 306, all over 2 times 1, which gets me negative 1 plus or minus the root of 1 squared, 1, plus 1,224 over 2, which gets me negative 1 plus or minus the root of 1,225 over 2. And when you use your calculator, you find that 1,225 has a square root, so it's negative 1 plus or minus 35 over 2. Negative 1 plus 35 over 2 equals negative 17. And I'll change shades to a different shade. Negative 1 minus 35 over 2 equals negative 18. Oh, sorry, this one is positive 17. So, x could be 17, which means it could also be 18. Or x could be negative 18, which would make this negative 17. Those are both the correct answers. All right. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do these 4 together. And then I'm going to expect you to do 86 and 87 and your quiz. Now, I remind you all, Mr. DeVries and I have both sent you emails. Sunday, this upcoming Sunday, I expect all the quizzes to be done. That's your due date. Okay? So, A, B, C, and we just rock it through for number 1. X equals negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81. I'll write that one out. 9 squared minus 4 times negative 7 all over 8. Negative 9 plus or minus the root of 81 plus 28 times 4 is 80, and 8 times 4 is negative, plus 112 over 8, which gets me negative 9 plus or minus the root of 193 over 8. And then 193 doesn't get any simpler, so we're going to stop there. Number 2, A, B, C. So x equals negative b, negative 2, plus or minus the root of b squared, 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 8, all over 6. Negative 2 plus or minus the root of 4. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 8 is 96. So 4 plus 96 over 6. Negative 2 plus or minus root 100 over 6. Negative 2 plus or minus 10 over 6. Negative 2 plus 10 is 8 over 6. Negative 2 minus 10 is negative 12 over 6, so it's 3 over 2 and negative 2. And I'm running out of room here, aren't I? Yeah, a little bit. So I can probably cram 4 in there. So let's do 3 right here. X equals negative b, negative 6, plus or minus the root of 36 minus 4 times minus 20 over 10, which is negative 6 plus or minus root 16 over 10, which is negative 6 plus or minus 4 over 10, which is negative 6 minus 4 is negative 10 divided by 10 is negative 1. Negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. Negative 2 over 10 is negative 1/5. So there's your 2 answers there. And lastly, where can I cram 4? Let's do 4 over here. X squared minus 6x plus 4 equals 0. ABC, x equals 6 plus or minus the root of 36 minus 16 over 2, 6 plus or minus root 20 over 2. And then, of course, you would simplify that to be, that's 4 times 5. So that is 6 plus or minus 2 root 5 over 2. Cancel, cancel. 3 plus or minus root 5. Exact answer, real world exact answer, what we want in class. Real world answer, we would use our calculator. 3 plus the square root of 5, 3 minus the square root of 5. And we are done. I want you to do 86 and 87. All right. Actually, 87 has a rectangle question. I'll do this rectangle question now. So there's my rectangle, W and L. A rectangle has a perimeter of 70. So that means 2 L's plus 2 W's equals 70. Or L plus W equals 35. Now, its area is 264, so L times W equals 264, right? Everyone agrees with that, I hope. Now, right there, L equals 35 minus W. What do you see right there? That's an L. If L equals 35 minus W, what can I write there? I can write 35 minus W times W equals 264. Now all I got to do is the math. 35W minus W squared equals 264. So then W squared, if I move that over, and I move that over, minus 35W plus 264 equals 0. And there is my A, B, and C. And then you can solve it. And that is the same thing you're going to need for number 4 here. Alrighty. I'll post this and post your quiz. And remember, all the quizzes are due on Sunday. The quiz you're getting today and the quiz you get Friday. Remember, I will have 2 hangouts tomorrow if you need them.